nation's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good evening. The latest news headlines on GB News and the top story. Liz Truss has widened her lead over Rishi Sunak in the race to replace Boris Johnson at number 10 Downing Street. A new poll of Tory members by YouGov put the Foreign Secretary 24 points ahead of the former Chancellor, just a day after the pair made it through to the final runoff in the Conservative leadership contest. Speaking this afternoon in Peterborough, Ms Truss said she's confident she would win in the next general election.
I'm somebody in every government job I've done, I've got things done, whether it's at the Foreign Office with our tough sanctions regime on Russia, whether it's at trade with the trade deals with Japan and Australia. I'm somebody who pushes through, gets things sorted out and gets things done. That's why I want to be Prime Minister. This is a critical time for our country. We need bold action. We are in economic difficulty. The whole world is in economic difficulty. It's not time for business as usual.
Well, the Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, swung his support behind Liz Truss.
I think I think Rishi Sunak is a strong contender. I think Liz is a very good candidate. She's my favourite candidate. I think she has a fresh approach, which is what we need. But let's not get ahead of ourselves.
The US President Joe Biden says he's doing great and keeping busy after testing positive for COVID-19. The White House says Mr Biden will continue to work in isolation for the next 5 days until he tests negative. The president, who's 79 years old, says he has mild symptoms and is grateful for the support.
I'm doing well. I'm getting a lot of work done. I'm going to continue to get it done. And in the meantime, thanks for your concern. And keep the faith. It's going to be OK.
The Home Office's handling of the small boat crisis in the English Channel has been described as poor in a new watchdog report. The Independent Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration has called for a more strategic response to migrant crossings, saying the system was overwhelmed. David Neal said data recorded on the migrants was awful and security checks on them were unreliable. The Home Office has responded by saying it has since transformed arrangements. A new photograph of Prince George taken by his mother Kate has been released to celebrate his 9th birthday. The young royal and future king is seen beaming on a UK beach wearing a polo top. The Duchess of Cambridge has become known for taking official pictures of her family to mark their special day. Prince George turns 9 tomorrow. Happy birthday, Prince George. You're up to date online and on TV and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News, where now it's time for Headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I am Simon Evans, and joining me tonight are two of the most grown-up comedians we have here on the Headliners roster, Sajila Kershi, Steve N. Allen. I didn't write the link, obviously. I do regard you as both mature.
Are we like the mummy and the daddy or something?
Well, you're just reliable. You're not hotheads. You're not going to get overly... You're not going to get into a flap, you know, because there are always one or two controversial stories, and you know how the youngsters get a bee in their bonnet.
Oh, yeah, just like the circuit.
You've seen it go around a couple of times. We can take these things in our stride.
Yeah. We don't have to run with a delay when we're on.
No, exactly. I doubt if you know any of the up-to-date curse words, do you?
You know what? You know when we first got trained for this, the media training?
Yeah.
Did you get the email where they sent out a list of the swear words and what Ofcom thinks of them?
Oh, really?
It's the best read you've ever read.
I know.
I'd forgotten some of them, but I used them again.
You can't say the word...
No, well, this is...
ginger,
Steve has laid
with
the
an
bear
M.
trap now.
Ginger with an M.
The one I always remember when I used to do Radio 4 comedy, there was one that none of us regarded as bad at all, but apparently in the North it's considered very much worse. Or I think it was it's a four-letter word, which mostly is used to mean idiot, really, essentially, but has a sexual swear word connotation in other parts.
Beginning
of the
with a
country.
T.
Yes.
Yes, I didn't know that was. Yeah.
That was the first one I got in trouble for from my mum.
Yeah.
Got told off for that one. Yeah.
From your mother. Anyway, let's take a look at tomorrow's front pages. We will start with the Daily Telegraph, which has leadership headline, no tax cuts until late next year, says Sunak, but all eyes are surely on the handsome young prince there that we saw in the news a minute ago celebrating his 9th birthday. The Independent have austerity warning over ridiculous Truss tax plan. That's quite a bit of editorialising for the front page. And Biden treated for COVID infection. They've chosen a photograph in which he looks remarkably well, better than usual, in fact, giving off a little bit of a Kennedy vibe there, in fact. The Guardian has Sunak goes on attack. That's probably not how you're supposed to pronounce it. I've been lured into that by the temptation of a rhyme. Over tax as Truss takes poll lead, and pride in Lionesses fuels a boom in girls' football. That's what that photograph is. That's not young Prince George again. Financial Times, they, of course, as always, go a little bit deeper with their headlines, have more detail than some of the other papers' entire stories. ECB vows to avert debt crisis as it lifts rates for first time since 2011. That's the European Central Bank, of course. And Tata threatens to shut Port Talbot steel plant without £1.5 billion emissions subsidy. The Daily Mirror has cops must now charge culprits. This is to do with the notorious Martin Bashir interview with Princess Diana, which took place, of course, many years ago, about 1995, I think it was, and led to her divorce, or it sped things up when it has obviously now become one of the BBC's most shameful episodes, and further details have emerged today. The Times have Truss and Sunak trade blows over tax pledges. There is Prince George once again, and causing offence isn't a crime, police told. That's encouraging. The Daily Express have BBC, we let Diana down, and Liz Truss, the smiley student with an eye on the future. There she is there in her infancy, and she hasn't changed a very great deal at all. And the final one we have is the Daily Star, who repeat the Express, we let Diana down, and I'm only here for the jeers, says some sportsman or other. So those are the newspapers' front pages. Let's have a look inside. Begin with Friday's Telegraph and the sparring Tory contenders. First up is Rishi. Sajila, you have this?
Yeah, I mean, we're down to the final two. It really is becoming like an episode of The Apprentice where, you know, they all the ones that didn't make it through, you choose your team, right? So that's what's happening. But they're also tearing strips off each other as well. Rishi, basically, he's accused Liz Truss of misleading public with non-inflationary giveaways. So this is in the Telegraph. The headline is "No Tax Cuts Until Next Year," says Rishi Sunak. I don't like it, but, you know, maybe it's realistic. And Liz, on the other hand, Ms. Truss, the Foreign Secretary, she's claimed that Mr. Sunak's approach risks driving the economy into recession, and she's announced plans for a new tax cut for stay-at-home carers. She's already pledged more than £30 million, which, you know, is going to be borrowed. We don't know where that's come from.
Yeah.
But I'm actually really shocked as to how she's got ahead in the polls when she was so unpopular. And for me personally, I'm kind of, it sticks in my throat that she went to talk in Russia to Putin and to try and stop him from, you know, and she wasn't very great at that. And when she keeps saying things like, I'm going to hit the ground running, it sounds so amateur. I went for, like, you know, a call centre job, and I said, I can hit the ground running.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like...
That's the way they speak, isn't it? But you do have to wonder, do you not, Steve, whether any of this is just a charade, in fact, that they are appealing to the people who actually get to vote about these matters on a completely different channel, I would imagine.
They are, and exactly, they must have the email addresses for the people involved in this, just leave us out of it, because it does seem bizarre that we're sitting through all of these debates or interviews. We're not
they were a
getting
charade, weren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, and although they dropped out of the third one because they realised, actually, all we're doing as a nation is just watching them slap each other. And then the idea of a political party that's split down the middle does not bode well. People don't like a split in politics. We tend to not vote for it. So I'm not sure.
Do you sense a strong split between Sunak and Truss? I mean, I know she's supposed to be the candidate of the right. She obviously tries to channel Thatcher every time she appears. She's wearing some sort of Thatcher LARPing outfit from the Amazon's like Halloween kit. But on the other hand, I mean, Sunak, he doesn't strike me as sort of, you know, like a red under the bed or anything. And I mean, both of them are fairly dry, really, aren't they?
I mean, it's so predictable, though. I think we, you know, predicted on the show, like, it's going to be those two. And it's going to be Liz that gets it in the end of the day, because I think she's been groomed for years on this.
So what's Liz Truss's pitch at the moment, Steve? You have that?
Yeah, this is... well, looking at the stats, the nearly two-thirds of Tory members back Liz Truss as new leader. They've done a poll. And actually, ordinarily, we would be saying now, well, surveys and polls don't tell us anything. Well, I think they do this time, because if you're the kind of person who's willing to take part in a phone survey about politics, you're more engaged with politics, so as a group, you're more likely to see more of those being party members. So this could be interesting stats. What Rishi's doing wrong here is he's trying to be realistic about it, saying, oh, we can't possibly do this. I mean, this is the benefit of the situation they're in. This is not a manifesto that they're selling.
No, they're halfway through, aren't they?
Yeah, they could make any old lie. He's being realistic, the fool, whereas now you might as well promise whatever you want to the people who are about to vote to you.
He's also slightly cringe, though, isn't he? In fact, he's extremely cringe. I think they both are, but there was some footage shared today of him kind of encouraging his team, and people were saying it's pure David Brent. You know, he was kind of... We've crushed it. We've absolutely... I mean, he's very Tony Blair. Everyone has acknowledged that now. Everyone is seeing that. His mannerisms, he does the thing where instead of pointing...
Yeah, pointing's rude. You've got to do that.
Pointing with the thumb. He seems to have all his speech mannerisms, and it just feels very much as, you know, as though as though a slightly overeducated little lad who's got promise, but he's opened his first little business while, you know, within the sixth form, and it's all going really well, you know, and you just think it just feels a little bit more gravitas wouldn't go amiss at this point.
We don't get that gravitas from Liz Truss.
No,
she's got no,
neither of them have.
She's the one saying that
they're both underwhelming.
That we can't have business as usual. She's promoting the idea of change, and I guess someone who used to be a Remainer and before that used to be a Lib Dem, getting pretty good at change. So maybe she is the person.
I suppose that is true. She has proved adaptable, which is supposed to be the human animal's greatest talent, isn't it? On to Friday's Mirror now, the BBC Diana interview, Sajila.
OK, so what's happening is Alexandra Pettifer, formerly known as Charles and Diana's nanny, Tiggy Leg Burke.
Yes.
How did her name change from that to Alexandra Pettifer?
Well, I assume that Tiggy was always short for something that she's just dropped. Maybe was it Tiguana, do you think?
I don't know how it's related to Alexandra.
Was short for iguana. So,
Alexandra. OK, maybe matching. Well, this is in The Guardian, and the BBC are now to pay damages to the nanny over Bashir's deceitful interview, they're calling it. And they've agreed to pay her substantial damages and apologise. It's been
they put it out essentially that that Charles had got her pregnant, I think.
Yeah, so basically, Martin Bashir, whose career was made and lost on that interview, Diana's interview, used lies to basically get her to come and do the interview, and said, oh, look, do you know that Charles is pregnant? Charles is, your nanny is pregnant with Charles's baby. She's, going to have an abortion. And, of course, then she goes and does this revenge interview. Effectively, that's what any woman would have done. And he also produced fake little receipts to show that people had been like using, you know, to sort of, you know, had used the press. It's right. You just put me off when you go.
Yeah, no, I'm interested. I mean, this interview has become so absolutely toxic now, apparently, that Tim Davie has pledged never to show it again. I don't think I've ever seen the like of that. I mean, I suppose that's putting it up there with Jim will fix it, isn't it, basically?
Yeah, and also promised not to even license it to any other broadcasters. So, in theory, we will never see this again.
Yeah.
And there's a thing in the article saying that because of its place in history, there might be some clips used in a historical context, but even that's going to be rare. And rightly so, because this is a hideous thing. I mean, it's almost like the message is don't trust journalists.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? But some of the stuff, like getting a graphic designer to fake bank statements. I mean, firstly,
but then Diana
just
played
use
into
Photoshop.
it. I think that they did recognise at the time, I think, that she was ripe for it, because the extent to which she played along with the extraordinarily heavily cold eyes, do you remember, and the whole outfit, the kind of, she was like the widow of the whole world. It was an extraordinary performance. I remember feeling really uncomfortable about it at the time, and that was before any details come out. But did you watch it at the time?
I did watch it, and I thought she was just enraged. Her eyes were angry, like you would be if you thought your husband was cheating and the fact that your entire marriage was a lie.
Well, moving away from journalistic ethics and onto scientific ethics now, and we have Alzheimer's data, Steve.
Yes, this is really upsetting, that there's a chance that some data was manipulated in the analysis and research into Alzheimer's, and it may have misled research for 16 years. So in an alternate universe, there's another Earth that might have a better position, you know. It impacts many people's lives, definitely mine. Both Mum and Dad had Alzheimer's. And I've been following Alzheimer's research and think, oh, great, they've got another breakthrough about the plaques and stuff. And it turns out the plaque research, they identify that these amyloid beta plaques, they build up and that might lead to, or certainly the plaques are in some way related to Alzheimer's. Yeah. But the research that they had, the images of the plaque build-up in the rats' brains, were effectively Photoshopped. They got the guy in from the Martin Bashir interview, who probably did the bank statements. And finding a way for your data to fit your hypothesis is not science, that's TV punditry. But science should back off and do it the proper way around. If you don't have the data, don't publish it.
It does. I mean, people have written whole books about this. There's an excellent one by a guy called Stuart Ritchie about the absolute huge catalogue of scientific advances and discoveries which have offered hope and which have turned out to be non-replicable and to have been fixed. And there are very bad incentives, it seems, in the way that these things get published if they have interesting outcomes.
Sorry, I was going to say,
Go ahead.
It's been compared to the biggest scientific scandal since, it's the biggest scientific scandal since Andrew Wakefield linked the MMR jab to autism back in 1998. And I don't know about you, but as a parent, that affected me. I really believe that. And that's the thing. And it also then ties in, I know we don't want to talk about jabs and vaccines and stuff, but we need to be told the truth. And when you're lying to get your funding, unacceptable.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because they are quite similar in two respects, aren't they? In so far as, you know, they've attracted some cranks and some fakes, but they are also, you know, growing conditions which are causing an awful amount of anxiety. People are desperate to see some sort of remedy come along. It's bound to incentivise again. Well, I mean, I hope that it's not going to put people off from making further research or attempts to find some sort of cure. Speaking of which, we now have Friday's Express, Steve, in which the virus is being put to its sternest test, or I should say the vaccine. I presume Biden has been
he's
boosted.
fully vaxxed, which is why I struggle to work out whether this is a really big story or a really small story. Biden tests positive for COVID, so it's big, it's COVID, but then, you know, he's fully vaccinated, so surely this shouldn't make a difference. But then he is 79, and age is a factor in whether it's bad for you, but so is obesity, and Trump walked it off. So it's still really difficult to work out where the balance is. He looks in the pictures to be doing all right. They say he's experiencing mild symptoms and is taking the antiviral medicine Paxlovid, which I'm fairly sure he's stuffing.
I think that's stuffing, whether it's the traditional sage and onion or maybe something more from the Thanksgiving range.
Oh, don't bring in sage. No one likes them. Alternative.
I mean, the truth is with
sage.
Biden, I mean, I may be biased here, but, you know, he doesn't look match fit from day to day anyway, does he? You know, Biden on a good day looks as if he's got a heavy dose of man flu. Whereas Donald Trump, you know, whether you love him or loathe him, you know, he went down there, he got the full blast of bleach and ultraviolet, and he was back in the saddle by the end of the afternoon.
His teeth must have been so white after those two things.
Do you have any views on this, Adina?
No, I was just going to say that he's had Pax Lovid, which sounds like a racial slur for a South Asian country. But the thing is, I had to make do with day and night nurse when I had COVID.
Yeah.
And I think, just personally, they should get rid of the day bit of the day and night nurse.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
only the night nurse.
Just doze all the way through it. Absolutely.
It's night nurse that works.
Friday's Guardian. Where has all our petrol money gone, Sajila? It seems that there's been quite a lot of it.
OK, so... Yeah, this is in the Guardian again. Revealed oil sector's staggering $3 billion a day profits from the last 50 years. And the gas industry, basically, oil and gas industry, they've delivered this much profit every day for 50 years. And it's using fossil fuel since the 70s.
Yeah.
This is basically all in a way to tell us that the emissions that we're burning from these fossil fuels have driven the climate crisis and the terrible weather that we've been getting lately.
But this chap, Professor, I assume it's a chap, I don't recognise the name, Aviel Verbruggen, is clearly trying to kick up a fuss and saying it's comparable with the tobacco industry, basically, that they've been so profitable, they've been able to by governments, they've been able to obscure the truth, they've been able to suppress scientific findings and so on. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like basically pet cartel countries like Russia and Saudi Arabia, they keep their rents high and restricting supplies. So that forces us to have to deal with countries that we don't actually want to deal with. But it's like a merry-go-round, because everyday people, gas and electricity is really expensive. And so we're like, oh, we don't care about the climate crisis. We don't care because we're worried about everyday kind of expenses.
That's certainly been the case recently, Steve. What do you think about that historically, the last 50 years? I'm not sure that does accord with my views. The idea that gas and oil in particular have been monstrously expensive, so expensive that we don't have any money left over to start investing in sustainables. That doesn't feel like watertight logic.
Well, no, I don't think the inference from the story would be that there's enough money to then sway political decision. Not that necessarily we don't have money left for anything else, so we couldn't afford to invest in greener projects.
Well, that is kind of what he said.
But I think
he does actually say that. He says it's stripping money from alternatives. The truth is, for the last 50 years, oil has been an astonishingly cheap source of energy. That's what's so amazing about it. Anytime you try and shift to a new sustainable form of energy, the figures don't add up.
The one's more expensive. But I think it's certainly in here it's saying about having enough money to buy every politician. That is saying that the money isn't just about outpricing the alternative. It's the decision makers might want a bit of this. And there's not necessarily any proof for it, but I think it's slightly more believable when you imagine a group of what should be good people, scientists, are willing to lie about Alzheimer's, so a bunch of oil people are probably willing to do stuff.
I'm afraid that's probably true. This part is over. Coming up after the break, a degree of levity. We'll be judging whether the most dangerous prisoner in Britain should be let out, the supposed increase in interest in women's football and rugby, and the impending American Civil War. See you in 2 minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, with Sajila Kershi and Steve N. Allen. So Friday's Times next, and the judges are in the firing line now, Sajila. This is about diversity in the legal profession, I believe.
OK. So, lack of judge diversity is scandalous, says the Times. Now, it's not surprisingly, 95% of senior judges made up white male barristers. And the latest statistics have emerged after the last time that they did this, 16 years ago, after the Judicial Appointments Commission, the JAC, was created to help increase transparency and diversity. So clearly, not much has progressed. The proportion of ethnic minority judges have risen by 7% from 2014 to 10% in 2022. And only 1% black and 5% are Asian. That surprises me because every Asian family, including mine, and black families, are pushing their children to become lawyers, doctors and accountants.
But I think it takes a while for them to work through, doesn't it? Isn't that the problem? I mean, you say 95% of senior judges are white barristers. That probably reflects the sort of profile of barristers generally 40 years ago. It takes you 40 years to become a...
but that needs to change. That's the whole point. It should be
but it is changing. That's my point. You can't just install people who haven't had 40 years' experience as judges in order to create diversity.
I am just giving you the article, Simon, as is my contractual obligation.
What do you think? What do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, but we could measure that. I don't know why we don't have the stats on that, because you can measure the, however you would phrase it, like the projections for the next 40 years. People who are starting in the industry now will end up being the judges decades from now. Let's get the stats on that.
That will be interesting. But you see now down here, it says, for instance, 65% of court judges, so that's not senior, that's all judges, 65% are men, but 95% of senior judges are men. So that just suggests to me that it's a degree of seniority that's working through. I wouldn't be at all surprised. Well, I would love to see what that is, but what is it at the intake level now? Because I suspect it's actually in favour of women. It has been. 60% of university intake now is women.
I don't know. I don't know where we go with this, Simon. I was going to hope to bring some humour, some levity,
No, I'm just saying. Don't you think it's a deliberate attempt?
Maybe my generation is all becoming comedians, and that's why Asian people aren't going into the law, because we're all becoming comedians and artists.
Do you think so?
Stop that. We've got to go back and pushing those ethnic minorities back into these industries. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I just see the number of women judges has increased 35%, up nearly 2 percentage points from last year, and compared with 24% from 8 years ago. So it just seems to me everything is moving in the right direction, but people are trying to create trouble. That's my feeling about these things.
I mean, you could read the same story as saying, look, there is change, and we should keep an eye on the change, and change is good because having a section of society that is represented is brilliant, especially if that bunch of people get to be judges. So having some representation, the idea that a collection of judges might be wiser about the country because they represent the country is brill. But you're right, you can't suddenly expect, these people are straight out of university, let's bump them up to judge, that'll fix it. It won't, it'll cause more problems.
And speaking of judging, Steve, we have an interesting judgment which is coming up for one of the country's, perhaps arguably the country's most notorious long-term inmate.
Charles Bronson, I think there's a solution in this. So they are changing the rules about having parole hearings be public. So he wants to make his one public. I think we should, and we should probably televise it and then get the ad spend from that and put it back in the nation's coffers, because we need to make money somehow, and this wouldn't be a bad way of doing it. He says that he's got nothing to hide. He wants the public to see it. He said, I've got nothing to hide from the media and public. It's a vindictive system that runs from the truth. He thinks the public aren't vindictive. Put this on telly and let's see what kind of tweets he gets.
I don't think the public would be vindictive towards him. What do you think?
I think he'd have a lot of sympathy, actually. I mean, given that his initial sentence was 7 years and he's been in prison for 50 years, but all the crimes he's committed inside prison, he might actually be safer outside prison.
And also, most of the crimes he's committed inside prison have been slightly comical. I mean, probably not for the people involved at the time, but they sort of have been. Like, he's had hostages held, and he's demanded, they call him Major or something.
General, I think.
Yeah, General, and then he just wanted some cheese sandwiches and a helicopter.
That was the one where he threatened to eat the captive and ordered cheese sandwiches. Pick a side, because you're not doing both.
But I have a book of his cell-based workout routines. He does 2,500 press-ups a day, or at least he did at his peak.
Well, no wonder he wants to get on telly.
I know. He
What's
could be a
his
huge star. He would be an absolute reality star if he came out now.
Like
Did you ever
Joe
see
Wicks.
the Tom Hardy movie they made of it?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Absolutely amazing, yeah. Well, I'd be in favour of him coming out, but they probably should, just keep an eye on him for the first, I don't know. I wouldn't want him to be moving in next door to me, I suppose. I do feel a bit 50-50 about it. But he must be in his 70s now. If he's been inside for 50 years.
Him on, Simon. You could totally take him on. I've seen you. You've got muscle, you've got guns, you can do it.
I've got a golden retriever. Friday's Telegraph now. What's resignation syndrome, Sajid?
OK, so this is actually real people behind the headlines, all the negative, awful headlines about refugees and migrants. And this is in the Telegraph. Parents had to watch their children deteriorate. The disturbing effects of resignation syndrome, which is a catatonic disorder that causes impenetrable comatose state. But there's no disease that explains it. And what's happening is refugees are increasingly being forced into inhumane and detention centres.
Yeah.
And they're breaching international law, and that is fact. Whether it doesn't matter who sports, what that is happening. And the reason I know this is because I do a lot of work with refugees. I've actually interviewed refugees, especially on the border of Syria. And this condition, I didn't realise that is what I was facing, because there were these, literally they are dead behind the eyes and they are not moving. It's like they're dead, but their just bodies haven't followed through. And this is affecting children, traumatised children who no longer feel hope. How awful is that? And it was described in Sweden back in the 1990s. And Australia, this has kind of been done with children that are sort of held in Australia, their policy, which has been likened to the Rwanda policy, where they're sending their migrants off to the different islands. And this happens when you literally break the human spirit. And that is what's happening. And that is the negative side that you don't actually hear. And I've heard those stories. I get really angry when I just hear that they're just like, I don't know, they're just cargo, or they're undesirable. They're people like you and us. And the women that I interviewed and I spoke to, they had been repeatedly raped by Assad's regime, and their children had watched, and that explained that catatonic state that their children were in, which I witnessed. And I remember feeling the trauma, that it's like a vicarious trauma afterwards coming back. But it's a real thing, and this is happening.
Yeah.
And I think we should be looking at the welfare of migrants.
Fair enough. Anything to add to that, Steve?
I mean, not really. It's a difficult one to try and bring the levity to, isn't it? But I will say, regardless of your opinion on what should be done to solve issues, whatever issues you think there may be in terms of immigration, wherever people would be sent to, you would expect them to have a certain standard. I'd say this. You certainly would expect people to be put in a situation that doesn't cause a catatonic state of be dissociated from
resignation
reality.
syndrome, which a couple of weeks ago, of course, we might have been hoping to see more of. But there we are. On to the Mail, and is civil war on the horizon for the United States of America?
I'd say definitely yes, according to this piece of research, because half of Americans think that there's going to be a
That's
civil war.
all it takes.
That's enough, isn't it?
Yeah, in fact, they probably had less than that in the 1860s, didn't they?
Yeah, I imagine so. If this half kicks off, next thing you know, you've got yourself a civil... The same stats also say that they will choose to bring violence, a gun to a violent political row. I like the stats on this, if I can go through two of them. More than two-thirds, so 66.6 recurring percent, of respondents said that they saw a serious threat to democracy, compared to 40% saying that having a strong leader was more important than democracy. So at least 6% have said yes to both.
Wow.
So some of them go...
They say it's a serious threat to democracy, but that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
They don't really care about democracy.
In favour of
They don't really like democracy in America, do they? I think they think it's supposed to be a republic rather than a democracy. I've never been entirely clear what the difference is, but I think they do. They have quite a natural instinct towards having a commander-in-chief.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's who they think they're voting for, and he's really a figure on the world stage as much as anything else. I don't know. It's quite compartmentalised. I could see secession. What do you think?
Well, I just loved, after that, the bit that you read, which just said that native-born... they basically think that native-born white people are being replaced by immigrants. America America. You are all immigrants, apart from the indigenous, people of America.
Well, no, you're an immigrant until not if you've been born there. That's a difference, isn't it?
Oh, really? Is that so?
Isn't it?
Telling that to people.
Some people would say the settlers were worse than immigrants insofar as they were conquering. Exactly. That's the right. Yeah, settlers generally
not turning up with small box blankets, are they?
But I don't know whether this is a. It has felt like this for some time to me now. I really do think this when I watch American politics. I think there is such a huge divide. They're not going to be. I don't think either side can just go, oh well, it was a fair fight, and I would personally, I would actually welcome a change of government at the next general election. Even though my sympathies are probably centre-right, I think they've been in there long enough. Do you know what I mean? You think the Tory government has been going on for over 10 years now. It's probably about time that there was a bit of a change of hands. I think that kind of principle, that kind of sentiment is not unusual in this country. There is an understanding that the pendulum swings back and forth and that's how a good long-term functioning sort of distribution of power and everyone feeling that they have a little bit of a stake in society. In America, I just don't see that anymore.
No,
I think they regard that everyone regards the other side as just being the devil incarnate.
I agree.
Do you not think that was their clever spin on what you've described? That by having Obama, they managed to motivate people to then Trump. It's like Neo and Agent Smith in The Matrix. The more powerful one gets, the stronger the other one gets. And I think they've used it.
They maybe have. Moving on to a subject that we are bound to find a unified agreement on. This is women's football, Sajila.
Oh, yes. I remember the last time I was on here and you and Leo.
Right.
So the Lioness's success inspires new interest in women's game. The viewing figures have really changed for women's football, and they're going higher. Young girls are being inspired. Girls who played for Stockport Dynamos under-12s are regulars, and they've been watching the match. And back in Surrey, my kind of neck of the woods, Lisa Parfitt, the director of the Women in Football charity at Milford Pumas Youth Club in Surrey, said her team has received so much interest. But, basically this is really engaging people. And not just that, it's also, to talk about diversity, representation is important. We've got our own Bend It Like Beckham. Asian Muslim girls are now being involved in Asian community projects. So this is a good thing.
Was that the plot of Bend It Like Beckham? No, I didn't. Was that the plot of Bend It Like Beckham? Was about
Bend It Like Beckham was an Asian girl basically wanting to play football.
Right.
If you watched it. Yeah. So, how is this not a good thing? But
no, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm not. No, the last time you were on here, I remember very well. It was a woman who was claiming to be as good as Wayne Rooney because she had scored as many goals. I'm just saying. Well, no, that you're not playing the same game. But I'm really happy to see young girls being inspired to play soccer. I kind of think. America would agree. Soccer is a woman's game, isn't it? Really.
This is where I find it really difficult because I don't watch women's football. Oh, wait for Steve to get cancelled. Because I also don't watch men's football. I don't care about football. It's really interesting that I do feel a bit of social pressure to be, isn't this great?
Yeah.
Football, I don't care about it either way.
I watch my children play football, and then I'd probably watch the Euros or whatever, a big final, a bit. But it's a social thing, isn't it? When everyone there are plenty of men, of course, who do go to the football every single Saturday afternoon. But I think for them, it's as much as anything a ritual by which they maintain their sense of who they were before they got married, and so there are all kinds of like social meanings to it. Yeah. But listen, I am absolutely delighted. Is there any indication among these figures about how many of those elevated viewing figures are young girls or indeed women watching the game themselves?
7.6 million viewers. I think. This match with Spain got.
But we've no idea whether they're grown men who would normally have been watching men's football or whether they're young girls.
I don't know if the men are watching. See, I'll be honest, I'm with you. I don't like football full stop, but I think this is a lovely thing.
I agree, absolutely. Anything that encourages people to run around a park is to be encouraged. That's it for part 2. Stay with that. Almost anything. Dangerous dog, I suppose. Stay with us because after the break we'll be discussing where teens get their news from, non-binary computers, we'll see, and the most flavoursome way to eat your food. See you shortly.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And welcome back to part 3 of Headliners with me, Simon Evans, with Sajula Kershi and Steve N. Allen. Now, this next one is from Friday's Mail and reveals a divergence in how teens acquire information as opposed to their parents. Should we be worried about this, Steve? More blank-faced children?
Probably not, because I'd file this under the category.
Yeah.
Teenagers are turning to Instagram and TikTok for their news. Yeah, surely we knew this already. This is what young people do, isn't it?
Are they, though, or are they just not getting news, in fact?
Well, they're getting whatever passes for news on those services, I suppose. But the actual stats, because the headline goes TikTok, because that's scary. Young people do
Chinese propaganda, right?
Yeah, and then Instagram, that's also young people. The actual research says they get it from Instagram, TikTok and YouTube, which I think we're on right now. So we'd be part of the stats. Not that I'm pretending there are loads of 12 to 15-year-olds staying up late to watch this. Maybe there are.
There are plenty of commentators on YouTube that I'd be quite happy if my kids were watching. It's just which ones. TikTok does seem to be fundamentally inappropriate for gathering news. I mean, those are very short videos, aren't they? Is that right?
But this, again...
Short attention span.
Yeah.
GBNews has a TikTok page.
I think it's so sinister, the way they're literally saying we've planted a time bomb in your society and we've called it TikTok. Nothing you can do about it.
I don't know why people are obsessed with this demographic, though. This research looks at young people. They are not getting their news from the BBC, which used to be the biggest
Craven. That's where they need to get their news from. What happened to John Craven?
Yes.
Country File.
Fair Isle Sweaters. That's where you're supposed to get your news from at that age. Oil slick gannets.
But, I mean, still you see the places where you expect your news to be gotten from. For adults, that's not changed massively, but there is research that says like fewer people are watching the standard channels. I guess some other channels come along and become disruptors.
Yeah, disruption is the name of the game. This next one is from Friday's Times. It's the synopsis for the prequel to the movie The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Sajula. I don't know if you remember seeing that.
So this is in the Times. Scientists unravel mystery of good and bad memories and potential breakthrough for mental health. So there's work involved. A researcher discovered that a molecule in the brain is responsible for associating memories with good or bad feelings. And they've tried this on rats, mice, not rats. And they've got like, basically, how do some people associate, like they've got memory and all they do is focus the negative on it. Now, I thought this was really interesting because I thought comedians, I don't know about you guys, but, you know, we can use our trauma as comedy. Yeah. And then once you put it out there as comedy, then our association with that trauma is actually pleasant or pleasanter.
Is it?
Because, I mean, that's what I found. Yeah, I found that.
You done that, Steve?
No, I mean, but then the way my gigs go, I just add to the trauma.
I have always said that there is, you know, my wife has a thing like, I say, oh my God, I can't believe that's happened. She goes, well, there's another 5 minutes for you. You know, you get a routine out of it. But that doesn't make me feel good about the memory of the thing itself.
No, but if you're making people, if you, I'm not talking like big traumas.
No.
I don't know, you've got a park.
No, I mean like having your bike stolen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you're whinging and moaning, you're angry, but when you put that into a piece of material, the audience laughs. It immediately makes you feel better. So that your association with that memory it's like, well, it's now a story. It's now become a story.
Do you think that could be a therapy people could use?
It can be used for
Well,
therapy.
I must admit, I prefer that idea to the idea that we're going to try and break this down on a molecular level. I think shame and bad memories are quite useful, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, every so often I think, oh, God, I can't believe I did that. And it's from like 2013 or something, but it's still going, nah. And that's quite good, because that will stop me doing it again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Learn from your bad mistakes.
They say that this is useful to be able to, get a grasp of how the molecule plays a role in sending the memory down either the good or the bad pathway.
Yeah.
Imagine how bad it would be if you could, get some CRISPR gene editing in there and make someone who has no bad feelings.
Yeah.
Firstly, how annoying.
Well, that is
be.
literally a psychopath, isn't it?
That's true.
Them, isn't it? This is all shareholder value that's going up as a result. No, I don't like it. I genuinely don't like it. I think there's far too much emphasis at the moment on trying to understand the brain's behaviour at a molecular level. I think people should read great literature if they want to understand the brain.
Leave brains alone.
Yeah, let brains be. Let brains be brains. The Friday's independent now, and is anything safe from the culture wars? Non-binary computers are real computers.
This is looking at quantum computing, and so it was an amazing step forward anyway. For a certain type of computation, in general, the science fiction of it is wrong. We think that quantum computers will be so much better than normal computers, and we think at doing normal computer work. They're not, but they're better at other things, trying to work out all the different ways in which a protein can fold. Get yourself a quantum computer, they can churn that really easily, because they don't just have up and down, one or zero.
Managing the accounts, they're not that good.
They wouldn't be, trying Tetris on it would not be great.
No.
You might as well just use a really fast normal computer for a normal computation.
Isn't the point? I don't very much, if you've got, like, in the 2 minutes we've allocated to this story, you'll be able to explain quantum computing to me. But my understanding of quantum mechanics, the interesting thing about it, the point at which it diverges from the normal world, is that it's more random, it's more probabilistic rather than deterministic.
Yeah.
How have they managed to harness that to make computing? Because that's anathema to computing, isn't it?
Yes.
You want answers, not probabilities.
And the problem is that these states tend to degrade in ways which isn't going to help computers. That's the big problem. That's why it's really expensive that you get a few of these qubits really cooled down, so it's massively expensive.
We've gone all the way back to Noah's Ark.
And this story is about how, instead of just using these qubits to try and do their analysis version of binary, ones and zeros, you can have other states in a quantum state.
Right.
So you can have on-off, or a mixture of on and off that doesn't resolve itself until the system's
So it really
observed.
is like the 52 genders, then.
It's getting there. Because now they...
Julie, you've got something to say.
I was going to say, because I picked up, I thought it was qubits and qubits. And it sounded very Harry Potter.
Yeah.
But what is the difference between the qubits and the
qubit is the quantum equivalent of a bit, which is a 1 or a 0.
A 1 or a 0?
Is that oscillation on or off. A qubit is like a digital, that's what it's saying?
This is a new thing for me, but it allows them to use more numbers, which actually is great. We really should have looked at it like this. Computers are stupid.
Yeah.
You can do zeros and ones. We've moved way past that.
They are good at Go, though, isn't it? Remember when they learn Go from scratch? Because that is basically a game of ones and zeros. Anyway, that's our first science story. We've got more science now, and scientists can look back to the beginning of time itself. I wonder what they will find there. Meanwhile, I don't remember what I had for lunch, Sajila, but...
OK, this is in The Independent. Scientists find way to see to the beginning of the universe. So they found a way to see to the very beginning of the universe, which almost means that when they look through the fog of the early universe, they see the light as it comes from the stars and galaxies. It's almost like going back in time.
It's exactly like that, isn't it?
It's like going back in time. But doing that is difficult, as you can imagine, because the view is clouded. It's got clouds, there's fogs, there's thick clouds, hydrogen, all these chemicals I don't understand,
diffuse
and the signals.
elements.
Yeah, and the so basically we're not there yet. We can't quite.
But is there
cover
some
time.
progress, or have they just been moaning about it?
Well.
Would somebody move that fog of helium away?
Is this the James Webb
There's a lot of moaning, isn't there?
I don't think it is. I mean, from my understanding of it, this is more about finding a way of processing, so you look at the fog and you can work out... There's a quote in here that says it's like trying to work out what the landscape is like by looking at its shadow.
Yeah.
And so,
well, it's going to be a little bit like noise-cancelling headphones, I suspect, isn't it? Which are extraordinary now. I have a good pair of... The one thing I would absolutely... That would be a desert island, even though there'd be nobody there.
Why would you need silence?
That
sea.
The sound of the sea, so I can listen to my white noise generator on my...
But I will say, before we leave this story, there's one fact that I love about this. So these photons have been travelling for 13.2 billion years. Here's where I try and blow your mind. From the point of view of the photon, do you know how long that journey took?
Not very long.
0 seconds.
Wow.
Yeah.
No.
Travelling at the speed of light. So time dilation means its amount of time experienced 0.
Wow.
So glad we've got a scientist on board.
Yeah, but he could be bluffing. I don't think he knows.
No one's got to check it.
You've got knowledge.
He's been getting away with this. You and refugees and Steve and his science, and you just both trust that I won't dare to challenge either of you. Friday's Mail and his class warfare, the next battleground, Steve.
Yeah, bans...
Something I do know something about.
You're an active participant in.
Yes.
Yeah. Class discrimination should be treated as seriously as racism, sexism. Of course I'm going to agree, it's the only one that gets me.
Yeah.
Being from Mansfield, working class upbringing, I still feel it. I still feel, as much as I might have tried to socially climb and marry into middle classness, you put a fish knife down near me and for a second I think, am I here to grout your tiles? It feels like a really weird... there are still things that hold me back.
Fish knives are, of course, the great indicator of lower middle-class pretensions to upper middle-class behaviour. Yeah. There's a whole poem by John Betjeman put out the fish knife stories or something. It's all about the things that people get wrong when they're trying to be posh.
So you've just listed 2 things that make me feel very scummy. Poems and
You
knives.
want to look up, it was one of the Mitfords, I can't remember if it was Nancy or one of the Mitfords anyway, had a whole list of things that are you and non-you, you being upper class, basically us. So, from the Mitford point of view, not from us. And so saying napkin is good and saying serviette is bad, and saying lavatory is good and saying toilet is bad. And there are certain things you just don't have at all, you know. And if you have misunderstood me, for instance, the posh thing to say is, what? Amazing.
Yeah, we're told that,
It's considered to be very lower middle class.
Oh, I did learn from lads to ladettes, or ladette to lads.
I don't think the Mitfords had a view on the ladettes.
Subscribe to Nuts magazine.
The posh lady, she said, you've got... It's pudding, not dessert.
Oh, pudding, that's right. Absolutely correct.
Pudding.
Yeah. So there are ways, you see, even from Mansfield, you can navigate this path. You just need to do a bit of reading.
Yeah, but I hate the idea that we're judged by these things. And no one's accepted for who they are because, you might say the wrong word, or my vowels are a bit flatter than they should be.
It is true. And even, I went to Southampton University. I was one of the few state-educated lads to do law there. And so I was surrounded by people who were privately educated. And by and large, I made lots of friends and they were fine. But there were always a few who would just ask you some question that was obviously just fishing for somebody. Where did you go skiing this? Do you know what I mean? You just have this kind of, what kind of grade are you up to on the slopes? Just these ways of, testing you out. And it's pernicious. I don't like it at all. I thought, traditionally, the British have actually mined it for great comedy. Most of our great sitcoms, Dad's Army, Fawlty Towers, there's always been class has been a source of friction. But now I feel like we've moved on, maybe, I don't know.
It could be a protected characteristic, according to this article, though.
Yeah.
So, part of the Equalities Act.
Well, if the subject of this next article from the Times becomes commonplace, I don't think I'll be visiting many restaurants anytime soon.
After you just told me about fish slices, this story in the Times, ditch table manners and eat with your mouth open. We have fish slices at home. Now, you've class-shamed me, Simon.
Fish slices?
Fish knives. Fish knives, yeah. We had them at home when we were growing up. I didn't know what to do with them.
I don't care, but...
I didn't know what to do with them either.
Just don't bring them out for special occasions, thinking they'll impress people.
You're right.
That's fine, yeah.
And the dessert spoons, the long ones.
Yeah.
So both crisps and apples are rated as the most pleasurable sound when the crunch is amplified. So this scientist or people that are researching this getting money from Oxford University to research that it's actually a more enjoyable experience if you have your mouth open when you eat. I'm sorry, I find that really disgusting. I can't stand... we've all been brought up with, at least one thing we can agree, doesn't matter what class you are, that you keep your mouth shut when you eat. But apparently it enhances the flavours. Meat, fruit and vegetables contain volatile organic compounds, and these molecules create aromas and contribute to the flavour of the dish and goes to your nose and taste buds and everything else. And quite frankly, I'd rather have no taste and still just have my mouth shut.
My wife gets furious if I answer. She will ask me a question. If I answer it while I'm chewing my food, then that will be a row that will last the rest of the meal. And it's absolutely infuriates me. But I know some people feel about it. I don't care at all seeing somebody else eat with their mouth open. But I don't like to eat apples and crisps with my mouth open. And I'm not sure I agree that it's any louder. In your own head, it's still quite loud, isn't it, when you chew crisps and apples?
I'm deaf. And without my hearing aids, I can still hear the crunch and the crisp inside with my mouth shut.
It's working through the bones.
Yes, I can still hear it.
But it's a different sound.
From the science perspective.
Yeah, from the science perspective. It'll be a different sound. You get more bassy notes going up the mandible, whereas you open your mouth, you get top notes, higher frequencies going in your ears. But the idea of this retro-nasal detection. So taste is pointless, isn't it? You do about 6 different things on your tongue, but everything else is all at the back of the nose. That's where flavour is. So, I suppose you get a bit more updraft.
Yeah.
But
I'm just showing them I'm so impressed. best.
But they may well have done the research to prove that it tastes better, but by how much? Like having a really good meal versus a really good meal with your mouth a bit open. I think I'd willingly not risk dropping food.
Is it not partly like a fashion thing? Like there used to be, I mean, sometimes they show you movies. Obviously, I haven't got any direct experience of it, but like Tom Jones, you know, the Henry Fielding novel, and they were like sort of slavering, and the juices are running down their chin, and it's supposed to be an indication that these people knew how to enjoy themselves, you know, and washing it down with flagons of ale and the liquid and the grease running everywhere. That seemed to be like quite a fashionable thing in high society in the 18th century. But
that's true. Henry VIII, chewing in the bones and throwing them back.
I think it might be a fashionable thing to some extent. You know, the extent to which you're quite happy to let people watch your physical processes, your biological. I think they used to have quite convivial lavatories as well, didn't they?
Really? That would make food taste better
as well. Yeah.
Have a little chat. Yeah.
Okay. The Telegraph now, and Egypt didn't allow public photographs. I was oblivious to this, Steve. But
yeah, I didn't realise.
It's been going on for some time.
They've lifted the ban, which I think is taking society in the wrong direction, because the last thing you need is more people taking more photos of things. In fact, you mentioned John Betjeman, and I forgot about this. St Pancras, there's a big statue. Well, there's a huge statue, but then there's a smaller Betjeman one. And I was walking through there once and saw someone with their phone out. I thought, I won't walk in between their shot. And then as I got closer, they were taking selfies of themselves, just accidentally pointing towards the direction of John Betjeman. And I did think, that is society crumbling.
That's terrible.
You go to a thing, you don't even look at it, you take a picture of yourself. What, in case you forgot what your face
himself would have
looked?
written a lovely poem about that, and very much like Sajila's recommendation that you tell routines and jokes about.
Yeah.
He would have transformed that into gold. So,
but they've changed the laws now, so there's still a restriction on taking pictures that make Egypt look bad, but no definition of what that means. In the article, they mention things like maybe if there's a dirty street, some rubbish strewn, but even then, there's no specific law saying you can't do it. So it's going to be difficult to know what makes a place look bad.
Well, we have just time for one more story, which we're going to squeeze in, because it's groundbreaking news from the Times. They've put enough women's toilets in a new theatre.
Oh, finally, good news for women's toilets. More of them. This is West End's new landmark. Is a relief for women theatre goers, it says, at Soho Place. Nicola Burns, we all know, is a huge part of the Edinburgh Fringe, has been for years. Owner of the Soho Place Theatre above the New Elizabeth line, has provided more lavatories for women, and this is a welcome in my case. I think I was talking to our producer earlier on, and I said I find it really distressing just to go to our toilets here at GBNews viewers are what would we call them?
Unisex. They're a series of cubicles, aren't they?
Yeah, but I still jump every time I see someone I don't know, because it's not an expected thing. So it's not. I don't think anyone's dangerous.
And in work toilets, I like to be able to have a shave, and I can't do that here. I just really feel that that's it. But I will say, it's quite interesting. When you get to open a new theatre in the West End, there's all sorts of things you can reimagine, because most of our theatres are extraordinarily antiquated, aren't they? I mean, tiny amounts of legroom, and the sort of winding passages, and just generally you feel like you're inside the inner ear in most theatres. And also as a performer as well. I don't know what the backstage area is like in these, but, I've never, ever been backstage in any theatre which was remotely hospitable or didn't sort of depress you, What do you think?
My favourite thing of this whole article, it says the reason they've got more toilets for women is because women take longer, and it said time motion studies confirm this. Time motion. Don't time people's motions.
Don't shame time motion and us shaming. How long we're going to spend in the toilet. That's awful.
Have you ever missed the start of a play or not been able to get your seat? Or
because it's always a nightmare to get. You're right, and it's also those awkward seats. You always the cheaper seats are always got like a pillar in front of you, and you think, that would be
just go there.
That's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Sajila Kershi and Steve N. Allen. I have been Simon Evans. I've done my 3 to make up for my failure to appear a couple of weeks ago. So that's me back on the normal. I think it'll be Mark Dolan for Friday night, tomorrow night, hosting Headliners with a couple more guests. In the meantime, have a very good weekend. I will see you again next week. All the best. Good night.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.